let's be real. We all want to know, when is the time to quit the 9 to 5? Not how, when. We got a system. We got a strategy. We've implemented. We've practiced. We've gained the confidence. When is the time to make that switch, to make that move? Let's get into it. Hi ho, hi ho. It's off to work we go. Why am I singing? We're singing. I'm brainstorming ways to think of clever introductions, and that was the one that came to my mind. The Seven Dwarfs, Disney. It's the work vibes. We're thinking 9 to 5. Okay, when do we quit the 9 to 5? When to quit the 9 to 5? When to quit the 9 to 5? Quit. Do it. Throw the towel in. It's time. Let's go. Okay, wait. We just need to figure out when. When do we quit the 9 to 5? When is it time? When do you have that confidence to put that 2 weeks in? When is it? Because when you quit, I'm going to quit. Actually, when you turn in your 2 weeks, go ahead and leave room on the back so that I can put me too. Okay, so when do we quit the 9 to 5? Let's start with all the things we need to have in place first before we make that move. The first thing is, you have to have proven to yourself that you have consistency. If you don't have it yet, stop the video. Go ahead and prove yourself some consistency. It's probably going to take you a few weeks, maybe a month or two before you come back. And then come back and we'll move on to the next steps. But no, we've got to have that proven consistency. We got to have that data to show us, I'm talking the hard numbers, the analytics, something that is law. You see the A plus B equals C, that you can do this consistently. Now, what does that mean, getting the analytics? Now, that could be simply having a trading journal, using that journal with paper trading, with sim trading over the span of a few months. Can you be consistent every month? Okay, if you can, let's move on to the next step. So maybe you have actually made that transition from sim to live. Maybe you've already passed that. You've put in the work for the strategy. You've shown consistency and profitability, and you're like, okay, I can make the transition to live. Sweet. Now we still need to calculate that information and show those analytics and those stats and that data that you can still, even in the live markets, still maintain that consistency and that profitability. Or maybe you have been working on a funded account. Maybe you're a funded trader with Apex and you're like, okay, I'm funded. I need to build capital. I need to maintain this funded account. So whatever it is, we got to have the data. We got to have the stats. You got to be able to take a step back and look at your month. Are you green? Take a step back. Look at your past few months. Are you green? Take a step back. Look at your year. Are you green? Okay, that is a great start. Those are great steps. If we are in the green, if we are maintaining, now that doesn't mean that every trade is going to be green. That doesn't mean every trade is going to be profitable, but can we maintain the profitability? Can we maintain the consistency? If yes, then, to my PHP guys out there, if yes, then we move on to the next step. If you have been able to pass an evaluation, you are a funded trader. All right, then, if yes, then we're moving on to the next step. Maybe you have already transitioned from sim to live and you've been able to show it, consistently and profitably, but maybe it's just not the account size or the position sizes that you were hoping for, but you can at least show consistency even with the smaller position sizes or the smaller amount of capital. Regardless of all of those different scenarios or all of those different situations, if you can prove to yourself that you are consistent, we're moving on to the next steps, which is we need to have a buffer. And by buffer, I mean either a savings account, a trading account that you have built up, or an amount of cash that you can afford to lose. We are not trading with our rent money. We are not trading with our grocery money or our car note money. We are trading with money that we can't afford to lose. We've got to have that buffer. Now, what does that buffer look like? It's not going to be the same for everyone. We've got to calculate our expenses. What are the bare minimum expenses that need to be paid? What is rent? What is electric? What is car payment? What is groceries? And then, okay, what is that bare minimum amount every month? Can we cover it with our trading? Can we cover just the bare minimum? Maybe if you were to make that transition to full-time trader, you might not be making as much as you would at your job. But then we got to understand, is that pay cut worth it? Can we at least at bare minimum cover the expenses? If we can, dude, we got to get that momentum. We got to go. So this is where the motivation comes in and that drive and that grit and that grind. Let's say that you've got that buffer. Now it's going to be different for everyone. I had the $25K buffer, $25,000 that I was like, okay, well, if all else fails and I've got this $25K, I can at least be a full-time trader for X amount of months and bills will be paid and I can still give this a go with the possibility of making extra cash on top. So just making sure that we have that buffer. What does that buffer look like to you? Is it $5,000? Is it $10,000? Is it 3? Just understanding, okay, do we have a buffer of cash that we can't afford to lose? And if we do, all right, we're just checking off the boxes. We're moving to the next steps here. We're getting closer to figuring out when is that time to quit the 9 to 5. My story, though, is just so different than like your average person who's working 9 to 5 and then wants to just go full-time trading. Like, I had so many different transitions. I went from 9 to 5 working at Einstein Bagels, working at the YMCA, working at restaurants, working at breweries, to then I started working for myself at home. I made the transition to working for myself. I learned how to code. I learned how to do marketing. I learned how to do social media, websites. I developed tools and skills that I could use to make money from home online. Like, I just knew that was not the job for me. That was not it for me. I never wanted to have to answer to someone or wear a uniform or clock in and clock out every day. Now, there were still had to answer to someone when I was, doing marketing or doing website development. Like, I still definitely had people to answer and deadlines to hit, but like, I worked for myself. So that was my transition. And then I made enough money doing all of these things. There was a point where I worked 3 jobs at one time. I was a nanny. I was working at the YMCA. Man, I was going to hair school at the same time too. I was doing it all. I was grinding. And then you've got to build that savings account. You've got to build some cash. You got to develop a budget. Put some money aside. But then also, trade as well. Trade during the part-time job that you have so that you can continue to build that capital. Now, it's so much harder when you are trading part-time and you're not profitable. And then you're like, okay, I'm not able to put any money aside. That's where we've got to develop a budgeting system within the 9 to 5 that we have. Or looking for some side gigs. I know it's easy to say, and some of you guys are a little bit older and have, more responsibilities. And maybe you've got, a partner and a family that you're like, I can't take on anymore. And I understand that. And I've got to brainstorm maybe some ways that I can help you guys. But for your average, single adult that is like, I got time. I can grind. I'm still young. Grind. Do it now. It's so worth it. Just putting all those things into play, developing a budget and a system to where you can put money aside and you can get a buffer so that you can still trade, but you're still putting money aside at the same time. It's just, we've got to have that buffer. So my experience is different than the one that everyone wants to hear. They want to hear that you can go from a 9 to 5 job directly to full-time trader. And I didn't make that split from bam, bam, like from one polar opposite to the other. I had this transition period in between where I had side gigs. I was hustling. I learned skills where I could work for myself and do as many different jobs as I could. I was like, okay, if I can make a website for somebody for $2,000, how many websites do I need to make? How many clients do I need to get? It's like, you got to hustle, man. You got to hustle. It's a lot of hustle. It's a lot of hustling, developing that buffer and getting that buffer there. I don't want to, make stuff up and be like, this is what you need to do. Because my experience is just different. I can tell you guys my experience and then maybe kind of piece some things together, or maybe just share my experience and then you guys can, figure out what's relatable to you or what you can, apply to your everyday routine or what you can apply to your goals or your life. And maybe that's the best way to help you, is just explaining to you guys my process and how I did it. But then ultimately just making sure that we have a buffer that we are able to or afford to lose if it doesn't work out. Okay. Now the third and final step. This one is tricky. This one is scary. This one is taking the leap. It's a scary one. Actually doing it, releasing yourself of that certainty, that consistency of a paycheck from that 9 to 5. Ooh, releasing yourself from that is a tricky thing to do. That's uncomfortable. That's scary, and I get it. But if you've already proven to yourself that you can complete steps 1 and step 2, we got to take the leap. Before we take the leap, this is the thing. If we are able to, at minimum, so we've got our buffer, outside of the buffer that we've got, the amount that we're bringing in from trading, if we can, at minimum, cover the expenses, we got to take the leap. We got to do it. We got to keep the momentum. Get that drive, get that grit, that tenacity. You got to do it. It's time to shine. Let's go. There's something that making that leap does. And it's scary, and not many people can actually do step 3. Step 3 is the scariest and the hardest. You leave all that consistency and all that certainty and all that comfortability behind to this new world of like, oh my God, it's me in the charts. Please remember this disclaimer. We cannot do step 3 unless we have step 2, which is the buffer. So make sure that we have the buffer. Now, it's going to be different for everyone. I don't have a specific dollar amount. I know some of you guys want to hear it. You need this much. It's different for everyone. If you are a single adult living in a studio apartment and your expenses are minimum, then your buffer is going to be minimal. But if you have a family to take care of and a mortgage to keep up with. Your minimum is going to be different. Your buffer is going to be different. So understanding that you got to understand everyone's journey is different. Everyone's minimums are going to be different. Everyone's buffer is going to be different. Let's just stick to the steps here. Step 1, prove it. Prove it to yourself with hard numbers. A trading journal that you can show anyone. You could show yourself. You can pop it up on the wall, and it shows profitability and consistency. Step number 2, build that buffer. And then step number 3 is take the leap. It's time to go. It's time to shine. Let's do it. Now, I got to be honest. My step 3 wasn't as aggressive. It wasn't as cut and dry, cold turkey, hot and cold. I had a little transition period in between where I went from working the 9 to 5 to working for myself from home with the skills that I developed, with marketing, coding, what have you, to then the full-time trader. So just understanding that, okay, step number 3 is the hardest, but let's do it. Let's go. It's time. And that is how you know when it's time to quit that 9 to 5. If you can complete all 3 of those steps, you know when it's time. I'm encouraging you to do a scan. Figure out where you lie or where you fall inside of those steps. Have you already made it past step 1? Have you proven yourself? Do you have a trading journal? That could be TradeZella, TraderSync, MyFXBook. There's plenty of journals out there to where you can see the hard numbers. And you can see, okay, based on all the trades I've taken for X amount of months or years, am I in the green? And if so, all right, we're moving into step 2. Now, hopefully simultaneously, during step 1, you are working on step 2. If not, that's okay. That's fine. Step 2, build that buffer so that if all else fails, you have got capital to cover funds, and this is money that you're willing to lose, that you can afford to lose in the markets. And then the last step is taking the leap. It's time. Let's go. And there you have it. 3 steps to know when you're ready to leave your 9 to 5. Obviously, it sounds so much more simple than it is, than it truly is. Easier said than done. If you have gone through these experiences, maybe you've already gone through the struggles of checking off those boxes for those 3 steps, and now you are a full-time trader. I'd be so fascinated to hear your experience. Drop it in the comments below. If you're still working on that, what step are you at right now? Thank you guys for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next video.